Hemshech Chaim Beis, Volume 1. Yes, we're still in Volume 1. It's a consistent line, the opening of each of these classes. Chapter 178. We concluded the flow of the discourse 44 on page 364, Shin Samad Daled, and we have to still finish the end on Vayhoya Ekev Tishmun. But let's sum up what we've learned. Essentially, it's an explanation in the Zohar. The Zohar that he cited at the beginning of chapter 175, the beginning of this Maimer, V'haya Ekev, at the bottom of page 356. So the Zohar says, Tas Kishrin, there are three bonds, Miskashin Dabada, that are tied to one another. Three bonds that are tied to one another. Kuchabricha, Raisav Yisrael. So he's been explaining this Zohar. The context, of course, is because we're discussing Torah as an interface. So the Zohar is a very intriguing one because the Zohar clearly implies interface, because they bind to each other. What's an interface? It connects things. It's a binder. Of course, the question is, what's the meaning of the Zohar and how does it work? So the Pirush HaPashat, the simple interpretation, this is not my words, these are the words that he uses at the beginning of chapter 176. He says, V'zeu Pirush HaPashat Yisrael Miskashin V'reish. Yisrael, as they come down to earth, as we all very well know, are ostensibly and consciously disconnected, like a separate entity. They manifest in a very concealed way into the body and the animal soul, into this material existence. So through Torah, through Yisrael, Miskashram Ba'araisa, Yisrael, the souls bind themselves to Torah, through study Torah, and through Araisa, through Kuchabrichu. Then there's the second thing, the bond that happens between Torah and Kuchabrichu. The same Yisrael, as they're learning Torah, they also bind godliness into Torah. And he explained what these two steps are. So the soul I just explained, because the soul comes down concealed. That's why Skashrus is binding two separate things. Torah too, relative to its source, also comes down a level. It's Nevlis Shalamayla, Nevlis Chachma Shalamayla's Torah. Torah is like the leaves or the drops that fall from Chachma above. So it's even Chachma above is also a drop compared to the Chachma higher than it, because Chakim v'lei b'Chachma Yediyah, God is beyond wisdom. So through learning Torah, Yisrael connect Kuchabrichu with Torah. In our study of Torah, he spoke about these two levels as in two methods of study. There's the Shema L'Shem HaTorah, that would be level 2. That would be the Shem HaTorah, to bring godliness into Torah. As he says, the end of chapter 176. There's also Mashra Rai Behemna, where it speaks about David was Mechaber. David bound Torah above with godliness, that he adds an additional energy into Torah, that Lishma. Like he says, you're doing it not for your purposes, but L'chasim Kenei. Ezra Chassid, that he does kindness for his nest, for his source. So it's not for our purpose. It's to Yachid Kuchabricha V'Shchinta B'Tachteinu, for the purpose of the divine. In other words, it's for Shashrim Lefanov aspect. Then there's the Meikara. Initially, a person begins Adaita de Nafsha, to connect his soul. So he says to bring godliness into his spirit and soul, and to the world. And that's already how Torah relates to existence. In order to awaken, as he said, the keiches of the nefesh halakis. That's a very specific function. And he spoke this is the difference in Torah before davening. That's the first level, kedem adfilah, misayeh lavedes adfilah. That in turn awakens the prayer. Like we said, it warms up, it ignites. Okay. Doing tefillah as I said, it comes ablaze, it's flaming fires, and then va'oz, as he explains, the davening is proper in its connection to the soul through and its constant connection to godliness and the revelation of the divine powers. Then the Torah that comes after davening is and there you're now drawing down Ein Sof and Torah. So you're reaching a higher level now in Torah, like the second Kesher, bringing Kudsha Bricha into Torah. And he says clearly, and that's Vahafta that comes, that after Vahafta you say V'hoya Dvarim Eila, after Vahafta of Tefillah, of davening, you come to Hoya Dvarim Eila. This is Divrei Torah, this is Torah, Shemam Shechin Seh B'Torah Meir Eir B'Nafshi. Now, that's God M'dahav B'chum M'dacham Moshe Chum Shechin Seh B'Torah M'kash Nash B'Torah N'Sav. Hoya Dvarim Eila. Good. Then he asked the question, I'm only repeating it because we want to go back to understand the parentheses in the chapter 178. Then he asked the question, what is this new connection you're saying? It's a connection to godliness, and a new amshachet that comes through Torah. L'cheda, he says, these are the words, l'cheda, also davening creates this closeness and connection, this bond. And we clearly see from the Zohar, it says, it's kashron b'eraisa, not just davening. And Adrabi says, the connection that comes to Torah after davening comes through davening. So what's this new addition, this is kashrus? She explains it in two ways. One is that tefillah is a form, is yes, it brings you closer, but it's in a form that's not retained and settled within you, b'shuv. It's a form of ratzeh. So it's not integrated, basically. And in Torah, it becomes integrated. In parentheses, he says, he goes back to the Torah that's l'shalei l'shma. This is Torah l'shma after davening. The Torah before davening, he says, is daita d'nafshe only. Because you only have a reflection. Even though it's Torah, so you could ask, so the question goes backwards now. So if that's what Torah does compared to prayer, why does Torah before davening not do that? So the answer is Torah before davening does it in the form of a reflection, because it's just a moaning, it's just an awakening where it's still for your soul to become, for your nekeches nefesh elikis. That's a parenthesis. And this itself, that the Torah should come settled after davening, comes through davening, he says. It's the first explanation. Second explanation is the kiruv nafshi b'tefillah is a lukus that's related to existence. And it goes the whole length. How contemplation could only bring you to a reflection of the divine, not the divine itself, because you can't have a contemplation in atzmus itself. Even remus hafla is also ultimately connected to existence.
Contemplation is like davening in this case.
The contemplation, during davening, Davening means you're reaching with your efforts, you're connecting to the divine. So ultimately you connect to something that you can relate to. The Yorim Kerename is beyond that. That's already Torah. So therefore tefillah is not in a way that it's only as existence, as godliness as it relates to existence. However you interpret it, the bottom line is ha'ara. Mashenkin through Torah mitzvahs. You have the actual atzmus. Because Torah, God gave us a gift. He gave us something, a part of Himself, His wisdom, His ratzon. This you don't get in tefillah. So this is the second explanation. That's not just a reflection that's related to existence, And then he adds another point, and also the bittul through learning Torah is from a different way. He brings from Tanya chapter 35, because the soul of a person, even at Tzaddik Gomor, is not completely nullified. Whereas a person studies Torah, it's connected. Because tefillah is through your effort, and you're connecting to God, and that's related to existence, so ultimately, it's not a complete nullification. Torah, on the other hand, is giving you so to speak, think of it like an oasis. It's giving you like a handle of the etzem. Like we learned earlier, that Torah is nurtured by God. It's a reflection of the etzem of the divine. And as such, you unite completely with it, like we learned also earlier, with your mind completely surrounded and unified with it.
Feel as a booster rocket.
Just a second. Yeah. Hold on a second, I just want to say something. Kufay and Hey, an interesting piece here. Yeah. In the beginning of chapter 175, he says essentially the same thing. He says, Torah is the thing that connects, because Torah is atzmi. Remember, he said, however you twist it, but Torah is tainug or it's chochmah, it's an atzmi. So I can give the power to tzaddikim to receive. In Perek Lamed Vav. We talked at length then. I don't want to go into that now. I don't want to get distracted. Atzmi means it's reflective of the core of the divine, because it's God manifesting His will and wisdom in a book, in words. Okay, so that covers that. Then he continues in chapters, all back to chapter 176. Okay. And this, learning in Torah now that we're talking about, which is a chiddush of Torah over tefillah, this is really Torah Shema. Ein ze lo hayir nafshi. It's not in order to illuminate and empower his soul. Parentheses, yes, v'hainu gam lo yibchin samshachos era meser al yedei tefillah. Like in Kabbalah Schar. Yeah. I'm thinking this parenthesis is connected to that parenthesis. Not sure. Okay, this study of Torah now that's after davening is to be makasher era Torah. Nimsh says is kashus be era Torah nimshach hamshachos erin sof b'Torah. And the esek Torah shlei eine b'gdei laravis tzemeinei. In other words, the study of Torah is not to quench the thirst like the first eifen. So, but if an aleph anal I learned meant the first method of learning for adaita denafshe, because there, but maybe if an aleph means here, maybe if an aleph means the rotze.
Yeah, no, it's before one step.
Hold on, let me just read it again. Maybe the rabbis and maybe an aleph not shekonu based with it. The rabbis siman the rotze betfila. I'm reconsidering the meaning of this meaning here. Initially, I learned that there's two ways to. Well, there's no question. There's two ways that we learn Torah. One is Adaita the Nafshe, which is primarily to reveal godliness in the soul, which means the purpose is to awaken the faculties of the animal, of the divine soul that are concealed within the body and the animal soul. And then that's learning Torah before davening. Then there's learning Torah after davening, and its role is primarily to bring godliness into Torah. That's called Lishma, not for his purposes. In the process, he discussed the distinction between davening and Torah, and there are two things. That davening is either tzratzei, and Torah brings it in begili. That's the chiddush. Or that the davening is related to divine as connected to existence, to elements, and the Torah brings the atzmi into it. Now he says, after the parentheses, he says that this learning Torah now is not in order to quench his thirst like the first Eifen. So the first Eifen I thought meant, the first Eifen is that it's for your purpose, to quench thirst. But it's not, as I read it again, it sounds like it's to quench the thirst, the first Eifen in what davening is. Davening is thirst. And the Torah then comes to quench that thirst. So in other words, that level, that first Eifen, that first way that Torah comes to quench the thirst, in other words, the davening is rotzeh, a yearning, and Torah quenches it, that is Adaita Danafshe. Maybe not in the same, more subtle level than it was davening, but the learning before the davening, but still it's the David Semenish. I think this Eifen Aleph fits with that Eifen Aleph. That's what it looks like here. So the Eis HaKater is L'Rav Semeni. Mashenke be'Eifen Hazeh. Be'Eifen Hazeh means both the Eifen of Lishma and the Eifen that Torah is higher than existence, the Etzem. That's the pshat. So they're connected. And that's not what happens at davening. So the first explanation would be Torah takes the air that by davening, which is in a form of yearning, and integrates it. That also has an element of personal gain, so to speak. Has an element that relates to you. Then there's another element that tefillah is godliness as it's related to existence. And Torah is godliness, the etzem. And that's already not the air that comes through davening. This is already a matana. And here, calling Yoni Be'Eis HaKater is not to quench the thirst that davening created, elicited, but to bring Atzmus Lamata. So we learned it then too. Basically, there are really like 4 levels, really. There's the davening, learning before davening. That is definitely a Adaita Nafshe. Then comes davening. In davening itself, there's 2 aspects to it. And learning Torah afterwards, there's 2 aspects to it as well. Yeah, we did discuss that when we learned it.
What are the 2 aspects of davening?
Well, it said the 2 explanations, whether davening is a form of yearning, or is it also drawing down Elikuz, but it's connected to existence. The 2 types of the 2 learnings after davening have those 2 elements. One quenches the thirst and integrates, internalizes, and one is just bringing Elikuz down. It's no problem saying you have all the levels. All of them are happening. It's just a whole, breaking it down. I went back because I was having problems understanding the parentheses at the end of chapter 178. Okay. Then went a discussion of what does this Iskashus do. So he says, even though it's achieved through a separate thing, meaning how the soul comes down below, and also how the Torah comes down below, he says, Iskashus, Shchera Nivanova, creates something greater, a beauty that you cannot achieve above. So first he explains it with the souls. B'nei Shalayim, it's the way they are, Malchus. Or Neshama is the Ban. Soul's the Ban. Then the soul below says to the B'nei Shalayim, we don't have the Yira that you have. We can't achieve this Yira. We're dark, but we're beautiful. We're beautiful because it creates Kala. It creates a Kaloyan. It creates a Simoyan. See, here goes back the word Simoyan again. Interesting. It creates a thirst. The thirst that we spoke by davening. It creates a thirst and a passion that you don't have above. A chesi is a sister, it's a sibling, it's a love, but it's a calm love. That's the word calm. Not fiery. And it's consistent. It's like it burns all the time. A kala, it doesn't say that at all. I would not confuse that with that at all. And then, a kala is not consistent. It could even be a break. That's where the neshama comes down below. But the fire that it creates is fiery. It's passionate. This is the advantage that happens down below, both in Ava and in Yira, as he explained. Even Yira as well. Because the bittul, a deeper bittul that we achieve down below. The same thing is the souls compared to Torah. In the root, souls are rooted in the letters of Torah. Shishim ribu eisis l'Torah, right? And when they come down, they connect to Eid HaTorah. Not just the letters. In other words, they're not just like, let's say, fruits on the branches. When the fruits fall down, they connect to the spirit within the letters, the chokhmah within it. And when it's a form of kala, with a yearning and a passion, that would be the davening. No, the Torah, kala, that's it. I got it. Now he's combining what he said earlier. So when they come down and they learn, and the learning of Torah is coming after davening, after the kala, that's what he means. The bottom of page 363. Then you draw down a new Er Chodesh, a new dimension. That's higher than Chachma. That's higher than wisdom. That's all what happens to souls. That's the beauty, the nova that happens through the darkness. Now what about Torah? We said Torah also, remember, descends. So Torah also comes down, Nevles, Levad, it's only like the drop, like the leaves that fall. And goes even further. Chachma Shalamad is not just, even Chachma of Atzilus compared to higher is also Nevles, because, and he explained it because here's how it goes. Wisdom of Atzilus is like the letters, the written letters, which are a superimposed entity, an additional Dover Nesef. The wisdom of Keser, that's like the engraved letters that are through and through, more united. And that's why the Torah is only naveless. It's only like a drop, like leaves that fall. Because even Torah and Atzilus is still leaves compared to engraved letters. Written letters is leaves compared to engraved letters. And through coming down below, you get a Er Chodesh Mamish. And this is achieved not on its own. The Torah comes down below, it remains, nothing happens to it. Who brings it alive? It's Neshamas Yisrael. Through their learning and binding themselves by Elokus, and through Torah, they bring down this new Er Chodesh. This Lasis is called Divrei Torah says. They create. And this is the advantage that the Torah gets below, even the way it's rooted above. So now we feel that the Torah has achieved a higher dimension, just like we spoke before with souls. So he says, "V'nimtza sheyesh yisn b'skashus lamate and b'skashus hanashamas belikus." That there's advantage, there's a quality that's achieved by the connection below, both in the connection of the souls in godliness and in the Torah. The first kasher, Yisrael miskashron, that it's in a form of kiloyan b'atzma seid and sof. It's in a form of this type of pining for and being dissolved in, absorbed in. And in the Gili Er Chodesh and Torah. And now I think I understand the parenthesis. So Zau Eifna Beishin is Bar Le'el Perek Vov.
Which parenthesis?
Wow. It's so short and so. At the end of the paragraph on page 364. This is the Eifna Beis. What was the Eifna Beis? That the Ratzah Tefillah is in a very high level. The Hainu B'chinas Kala. That was the first interpretation in Tefillah. The Tefillah is in a form of yearning, and what's Torah do? It quenches the thirst. Which is really, but he's saying the Tefillah Badrei Gavoi Yesu. He didn't say that before, okay. So this is the Eifna Beis, Er Chodesh B'Torah, V'kol Shken Amshach V'Eskasher Be'erin Sev Sheb'Torah. Okay. Yeah. He's referring to, the problem is there it calls Ratzei that Tefillah Eifena Aleph. That's the problem. I thought I got it. Maybe I did get it. Let's see. Let me just see something. He called it Eifena Aleph. Ratzei that Tefillah was the first Eifen. He said that's the first Eifen. That's what he said. Yeah. I have two ways to say. I don't want to say Eifena Beis should say Eifena Aleph, because I don't want to correct this, because I may be wrong completely. Because technically speaking, this expression that Tefillah is Ratzei, yearning, and Torah quenches that, is the first Eifen. Here he's calling it Eifena Beis. That's the ostensible question. So the only way I can interpret it is perhaps, if you don't correct the Eifena Beis to Eifena Aleph, is
quenching it has to be the second part.
Quenching is still the first one. That's what he said clear, is the first way.
Even Aleph, you get unquenched. It's unquenched.
No. The Tefillah is a thirst, and Torah unquenched. That's Eifena Aleph, and here he's calling it Eifena Beis.
But Eifena Beis of Tefillah and Eifena.
What are you talking about? I just read to you. The first way is the Torah. What's the difference into prayer is a thirst, and Torah quenches that thirst. That's the first way.
But you also divided.
And then there's a second way, which is that Tefillah connects existence, godliness that relates to existence, and Torah relates to godliness that's the etzem beyond existence. So there's no question that it's seemingly, when you go there, is the first way. But I'm thinking, now he's saying, maybe he's saying something, because he says, that maybe what he's adding is that the second interpretation there really also has an element of yearning. Not necessarily. It's a little more complicated than you think. It's not so simple. But let's say the second way also has an element of yearning, but it's a far greater, higher yearning than the first way. But there, it's alakush shaychus la'ilmis, and then Torah reaches the etzem. Then I don't understand then how what Torah accomplishes. The Torah is what? Quenching that thirst too. Hainu b'chinas kala, it's the level of kala. Okay, that makes sense. Kalayin, he's going, expiration that's going, there's kolsa nafshi, the ratzei. For kolskein, and definitely, and definitely the drawing down and the connection of godliness and Torah. In other words, even tefillah is a high level of ratzei. Yeah, you'd have to force it and start saying that the second way there, which is talking about davening as it relates to existence, is also an element of ratzei. It's a deeper level of ratzei. But then you would be saying something that doesn't say specifically in the chapter there. And it would create a whole new confusion, because... one second. Eifen HaBeis, one second. If in Abbez, I should the Kirov Nafsh Betul B'chinas Alakus HaShachas L'Olam. There's God. Hold on, let me just see if I can find a hint to it. Okay, so the come live on some source. Unless he's hinting to Tefillah B'chinas Ave B'tainugim. Maybe. Bottom line is, if you learn that this is Eifen HaBeis and not Eifen Aleph, you have to say that he's adding something that's not there in the chapter. Something about Tefillah being a higher level of Ratzei. But it confuses matters, to be honest, because what happens then is, how do we understand Torah? Torah is higher than worlds. It's talking higher than the elements. Torah is even more than this. What means Rotz? If the yearning during davening is a higher level, that still doesn't make it internalized. It's still a yearning. On the contrary, you're even yearning more. So what do we achieve by that? And he doesn't say that, but the second eighth from there, he speaks about tefillah being a bonus about things that are related to existence. Lula mistapina, it's far easier. Kolshkein. And definitely the Amshchav. Okay. We're going to look into it more even, but I just wanted to touch about it. And the same thing is also the connection of Teir Belakush, and that's the Tlas Kishin, the three bonds. So three bonds you have. Israel, the Neshama is connecting to Teira to godliness, and then you have connecting godliness into Teira. Teira ba'atzmus ein sof. So there's a connection of the souls to Teira, through that to God, and there's a connection of the godliness to Teira, atzmus ein sof. Vasei de bezed, first you start with the bond of Israel and Teira, by Dei Skasha, Shem Yisrael b'Teira, b'Beizei Fanim Hanal. And through the bond, the connection of Shem Yisrael both ways. I have to say both ways means Lishma, Shalei Lishma, for sure. This is for sure both ways. It cannot be the both ways with the tefillah. Well, that also relates to it. Okay. One is in order to quench his thirst, and one is in order to bring Elikus down into existence. Fine. I just want to add one point which I think will help. Davening, the learning before davening is for sure a it's for awakening the divine soul, the divine faculties, or the faculties of the divine soul within us. So definitely for the nefesh. Tefillah begins to focus not on you, but begins to focus on God. That's a key point here. But it focuses in a way that you go out of yourself to yearn, kaloyin, kala, to yearn, the tzemoyin, the thirst. Then comes Teira to quench it. So here too, Teira, even though now you're doing with tefillah, that's what he wants to say here. Because that's why I don't understand the Eifon HaBeis, but forget about the Eifon HaBeis. What he wants to say is that tefillah is also not for you. Because tefillah, you're trying to connect to the divine. But the thirst, the quenching the thirst of it, is back to you again. So tefillah takes you outside of yourself. Yeah. Teira before davening is about awakening, starting to awaken God. It's like warming up to the idea of the divine. Tefillah takes you out of yourself and you to focus on the divine. But it's outside of you. Teira afterwards quenches that thirst and therefore internalizes. And then there's another element of Teira that goes deeper. It's not even quenching your thirst. It's about bringing godliness into Teira and into existence. It's about God. That's the kolshkein that he's saying here. So Ratzit Tefillah is taka kiloyin b'atzmus ein sof, and it's also Gilui Chadasha b'Teira. So Ratzit Tefillah is already also taking you up to a higher level, Kala. But for sure, the Amshacha, the draw down and the connection, Eidim Sef and Teira, that is the real Gilui of the divine down below. That's the Vart. But what's the Eifon HaBeis? Eifon HaBeis, the Rotz is in a higher level of Rotz, a yearning. It's more outside of yourself. No, but that's not the Vart. More than yourself. Outside of yourself, so it's not so much for you. It's not so much for you. I have to analyze it more. When you say that you're contemplating on the divine that relates to existence,
you're not satisfied with that.
What do you? I don't know what you're saying. What does that mean? He's not saying. He never said that anywhere.
In Alpha Bays, you have a beauty of things matter related to existence. Then you take it a step farther, and that's not.
Who says that? You take it a step farther.
Just said when you were reading it.
No, it doesn't say that. I'm trying to explain it maybe that way. I'm trying to explain it that way, but it doesn't say it. That's my point. That's my concern, actually.
Well, it does seem to fit
Anyway, so bottom line, through the connection of Neshama Soul and Torah, both ways. So both ways would mean both, in order to serve his own soul or to quench his thirst, and the way l'shma for Neshama Soul and Torah, that creates a bond between Torah and B'Kudsha B'Richu. That creates the bond of Torah within godliness, and that's the Chodesh that comes into Torah. We'll continue on now. V'alpi hanal yuvan. I'm going to get back to when we finish the chapter. We'll do the kitzur. I'll try to sum it up in simple English, in a clear and concise way. V'alpi hanal, according to the above, maybe here there'll be something that illuminates. V'alpi hanal, according to the above, Yuvan will understand Mashakazu v'haya Ekev Tishmon. The beginning of the Maimer was the questions on the pasuk v'haya Ekev Tishmon. There were a bunch of questions. What are the questions he asked? Just to refresh ourselves. He said, what is this whole... Once you say v'haya Ekev Tishmon, because you listen, why does he say v'shmat v'asisim? Why do you have to repeat that you will protect and you will perform, you'll fulfill these mitzvahs? The whole limit, v'haya Ekev Tishmon, because you're listening. The whole purpose of listening is in order to perform. Not just to listen. Also, what is V'shomer Hashem l'kachasa? Bris v'sachesed. What are the three things? Bris, chesed, and shvuah. A covenant, chesed, a kindness, and an oath, or oath. These are all things that don't have any conditions. All these things happen without any conditions. Both the covenant explains the covenant, the chesed, also shvuah. So why does he say v'shamar? Only that God will protect this covenant, these three things, and it comes after the condition v'haya Ekev Tishmon. It makes only a condition. And also, what's shmirah? And also, what's Ekev Tishmon? Why is the word Ekev? Why does it say im Tishmon? Those were the questions. Now he says the Ekev wa madrega tachtena shebeneshama. Ekev, which means literally also heel, is the lowest level of the soul shezeh b'ridas lemata. That's the lowest level of the soul, and that refers to as the soul descends below. The mashabol lemata b'chinas islapshu says rak hamadregas hatachtena shebeneshama, because the part of the soul that is manifest below, it's only the lowest levels of the soul, Ekev of the soul. Because as we spoke before, what did we say? We'd say Shcheira Nivanova B'nei Shalayim. The soul below is speaking to the soul as it did not manifest. So clearly, there's the soul as it manifests, and there's deeper dimensions of the soul that don't manifest. So that's Ekev. So when we say Ekev, we're talking about those levels of soul. However, specifically in this lower level of the soul, as it descends below, that's where you have the desire and the kiloyan, the yearning, the pining, the expiration of the soul, like a kala. That we discussed earlier. V'gam Ekev, another thing, Ekev also made al ikvus meshicha. Ekev has another meaning. Besides being low, the Ekev meaning like the so-called the heel of the soul, which means how the soul manifests. It also referring to ikvus meshicha, which means the heel of Mashiach. So it's referring to a period in time. The bezeh hazman, ikvus meshicha is referring to. See, history is seen like a human body, with Adam and Chav and Gan Eden being the Rosh, and we travel through the body all the way to the end of time, the end of history. As we know, it is the lowest part is the heel. So you have the whole body of history is from the beginning of time to the end of time before Mashiach comes. So Ikus Mashiach means on the heels of Mashiach. The Bezaz Man also means the heels of Mashiach, and Mashiach is coming, so it's on the heels of Mashiach. But it refers to the lowest end. The Bezaz Man, and this time Apirov, in general, as a rule, Apirov means the majority. Hey Neshamas Madregas Tachtenis. Apirov, in this time, most souls are on the lower level. Souls that come in an increased measure of manifestation and being contained by the material, an increasing way. So in other words, he's connecting the two meanings. That Ekev, when is Ekev the Neshama? When is it most manifest? Most souls in our time, in the end of time, in Ekev Mashiach, are Ekev Neshamas, are souls that manifest in a very coarse level. Yeah, like I mentioned with the cave, these are the souls that go to the deepest and darkest places. So they are they go into the deepest Gashmi as possible. Shama's earlier generations did not manifest quite as much. It was edler, it was more refined, and so on. And this is the primary thing of Shchera Nivanova. So even though he said before this man that Shchera Nivanova, that darkness refers to, but in general the time of the soul's descent below, he says the primary is in the last generations, the real Shchera, the real statement where the soul says, I'm dark.
So we're the real purpose of existence, our generation.
Yeah, the Shchera Nivanova. In the intensity of the yearning and the pining and the expiration increasing in an increased fashion, in a powerful way. So the deepest yearning, the most intense, is in our time. That's what he's saying.
We see that.
In a certain way, yes. Because we have, they, in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, were like sisters, sibling. It was a more stable and not as...
They're more jaded.
Yeah. And Tafka, through this descent below, you draw down something hard. Because Torah above has its connection. Just like we said, souls above have their connection. But down below where there's resistance, down below where it's dark and cold, that's my addition. There, by studying Torah, it elicits what's the word I want to say? It's a catalyst for a passion and for a thirst that you don't have, and that brings down an Ir Chadash in Torah. That's the Ir Chadash in Torah.
It's like it's completely black and a little light, one little light bulb, boom.
Where is the piece? Oh, right here.
I love this stuff.
English, one second, my friends. I just want to see something. I hear what's going on. Torah connected to worlds. Remember, David focused on Torah as it related to worlds. His Torah was like the Torah before davening, or the Torah that quenches the thirst after davening, because it's all related to some type of function it serves. And the goal is to reach Torah that's God's delights. It's an important, very important point. And where do you reach God's delights? Dafka below, because above, Torah can be learned for personal gain, so to speak. The soul is connecting to have a connection to the divine. It wants to know the divine. Down below creates the distance, creates the passion. That passion elicits a whole new level of Torah that's God's delight. It's not about me. That's the thing. It's not about me. Then he said by Yira, he said, remember, Yira is a bitl of ein oid, not kala chashiv. Kala, I'm nullified because I'm in the presence of the king, of the source. Ein oid is a complete bitl. And when down here below, when you come to that passion, so you reach a level in Torah that's the way Torah is by God Himself. It's the Torah, the divine delights, not what it does for you.
Because it's unfathomable.
So in other words, the tzaddikim, the more you're connected, the less you have the divine of Torah as is by God. Because you have the Torah as it relates to what your connection is. That's the key point here. That's the key thing. You just have to figure out how it works with davening and everything. Because tefillah seems to be a thirst that you're going out of yourself, but then you need to quench the thirst because you want God. So it's like, im I want God Himself, but it's going out of you. So Torah is bringing it back. So it's again in order to quench your thirst. Then there's a level where you're learning Torah not to quench anything, not to say, oh, I want God, and now I have God. On the contrary, to go just simply to experience God on God's terms. That's the key here, to experience God on God's terms.
Experience?
Let me say by Chitzeni Satira Nigla, you reach it through Yagiyah, through struggle. In Prima Satira, you just have it l'chatchila. Nigla the Torah sounds like very much Torah that's connected to existence. Okay, let's continue on. I'm sorry, I just got distracted because I'm trying to understand. Here you see the words again, Maklim B'Yesir. See, these ends of the Maimarim were written afterwards, a long period afterwards. So sometimes reading it, one line, one word can shift how you understand what we're learning inside. That's why I'm doing this.
So these ends were written around the same time as the Kitzur, or before? Or?
The Kitzur was written far, far later.
Uh-huh.
It's 4 stages this was done.
And the Alpi Anal that we're learning now?
It's the second stage. The first stage was the actual Maimarim. Then he added beginnings and ends and plenty of footnote and plenty of additions. Then that was all combined and he edited it again, the Rebbe Rashab. Then the 4th time he went back and made prakim. He made chapter numbers. Broke the chapters and numbered them, and added the summaries. Okay, Bozeu ikar inyan shachsher and v'nebchin is a take of arotz v'klein b'yeser. V'ydavkin imshel gili er chodesh b'teira, and through this specifically, you draw down a new er chodesh in Teira. V'zeu eikav tishmonas mishpatim, and this is the meaning of eikav tishmonas mishpatim. Hainu, which means hamshachi hi b'teira. Hamshach is in Teira. So that answers the first question. He asked the question, then he says, and then he says, V'shmartem. When you listen and you learn properly, the whole purpose of the studying is to bring it down. He says, no, the first part of the pasuk is Ekev, that the Ekev is Tishmonas HaMishpatim, reveals a new Er Chodesh and Teira. Then comes, and then comes V'shemat V'sisim Eisam, Hu Shechashiv Kan Gimel Madregas Machshav Dibur Maisa. Now you can consider V'shemat V'sisim Eisam, the next part of the sentence, the verse, second part, is now as it comes down, 3 things he counts. Shematem V'sisim Eisam. Right? It counts 3 things, 3 levels: thought, speech, and action. Tishbenuin Namachshava. Okay? Hold on a second. I'm sorry. Tishbun is a machshava. But it's like here. Okay, fine. So be it. So he says like it's aha. The ekev tishbun as a mishpatim, by ekev tishbun as a mishpatim ha'ela. So ekev causes you to really listen to the mishpatim, which means to bring the erchadesh, the new energy, into the Torah. Okay, good. And what it says was Shematem V'asisim Eisam. After the word Tishmun, he says Tishmun is Machshava. That's, I guess, the learning. Question of Ozen Milan Tivchan. Your ear distinguishes between words. No, so therefore Tishmun is a form of Machshava. It's Tivchan. It's a contemplator. so to speak. Selects. Tivchen means also Tavchen will appreciate. Tavchen will discern. That the ear discerns words. V'shmartem hu dibur. The word shmartem is dibur, word, is speaking. U'kamaymer imarucha b'chol v'shmoira. It says imarucha b'chol ramach evorav. That if you'll be prepared with everything v'shmoira, you will protect. So protecting is a form. Why is it? How to prove that it's dibur? I don't know. Imarucha.
Because you learn all day.
B'chol ramach evorav.
If you learn dibur, you remember.
Okay, so imarucha is talking about dibur. That if you will be prepared, in other words, you'll also say it with words. Yeah, because I'll tell you what it says. Imarucha b'ramach evorim. That you learn Torah with all your 248 organs. I mean, not just with your mind. You're also speaking. The bottom, right. V'shmur, then it will be protected. So shmartim goes on dibur. Because dibur, how do you protect? How do you preserve? Preserve is a better word here. Is through words. Dibur, speaking. V'asisim u'maisa. So we have the three things. And asisim, action is maisa. That's the thought, speech, and action of Torah. The Esek HaTorah is machshava dibur maisa. Because study, the immersion, engrossing in Torah, immersion in Torah has to be with thought, speech, and action. The machshava iyun, thought is iyun, is iyun, depth, more than depth, immersion in depth. Lahavin, to understand, ulahasing, to comprehend mashu lemit, what he understands, what he's studying. And the second thing, you also have to have in Torah, you have to speak it. They are chayim, they are alive, to all those that express them. So he expresses, Chazal say, to those that express them. It comes alive to those that express them with their mouths. That's dibur.
Thing comes not real.
Chayim heim l'meitzeim. What does meitzeim? The words mean chayim. They are alive to those. L'meitzeim means you could say to those that follow them. You could say to those that l'meitzeim, to those that draw them out. So he says l'meitzeim bepeh, to those that draw them in their mouths. In other words, those that it's like we just said b'shmartim, that is preserved. It's life for those that express them in their words.
Like an energy.
Torah needs to be spoken in words. And the third thing Torah needs is action. To study in order to perform, in order to implement. And through this, the study of Torah in these three ways, thought, speech, and action, Nimshach is drawn down, is transmitted a new dimension, a new light, a new energy in Torah. Like it says in Sefer Shabbein, in Tanya, Chelik Aleph Perek Dalet, first section, chapter 4, the Machshava Dibur Maisa Torah, Hagam Shein Levushim Levad, the thought, speech, and action in Torah, even though they're only garments. Why are they garments? Because they're not faculties, they're not part of your system. Like garments, you dress them, you could undress them. Thought, speech, and action can be filled with all kinds of things. Your faculties are your personality, your mind, your emotions, and so on. So he says, even though only garments, their quality, their mailosan, their standing is extremely high, infinitely high, over the standing of Naran, Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama itself. And that's what he says afterwards. V'shomer es habris. So v'hoy Ekev Tishmun, that's why the Ekev Tishmun is the Akdama, the Ekev, the souls as they come below, they're the ones that do the Tishmun, they're the ones that cause the Ir Chodesh to bring the new energy into Torah. That is through the three things, Tishmun, thought, V'shmartem, speech, Vasisam, Esam, action. And this is what he says afterwards, V'shomer es habris, and God will protect, preserve the covenant. The brisu in dezeu inyan ta'teira. Bris, the covenant, that is Torah. Shenikra Sefer HaBris, it's called the Book of the Covenant. U'kamashikosav imlei brisi, like it says, imlei brisi. If without this covenant, the whole heaven and earth would not be sustained. We learned it before, the condition God makes. The Torah is the covenant with without the covenant. So Torah refers to the covenant. And that's a form of unity and union. As we learned before, and he repeats it now again, like what's a krisis bris? Krisis bris literally means a cutting of, you say you're calling the cutting of the covenant. They split, they cut open, they cut into half, something into two. And the people making the covenant walk through the two parts, like what happened by Avram Avinu. Through this, there's a unity of those that are separate from one another. That's what a krisis bris. Very similar to what he said about iskashus. Remember, iskashus is two separate things uniting. Okay, so that's the hemshech. After saying that teira ir chodash, they're bringing down the new energy to machshav dibra ma'aseh, then he continues as the bris that creates a unity. This a unity that doesn't exist above, the unity that comes after down below. The krisis bris, a union, which is through Torah. Torah is the bris. Then he says v'achesed. Then the next thing, the kindness or the love. Who begins chesed, the kshet. This is called chesed of truth. Kshet in Aramaic is truth. Well, there's truth. Kshet also means kshet atzmecha, bind yourself. The chesed of binding. But it has two meanings. Kshet means truth and means binding.
Binding with the
chesed atik. Let's see what he says here. This is the level of chesed of atik. That's atzmus ein sof. That's the core, infinite, divine energy. He's not explaining. He just says that's what it is. In other words, so it's a high level of atzmus. Okay. Vashvua, and the oath. He kamashakasu asher nishbata lavaseni mi mekedem b'chinas kadmenu shleila. Shvua too. So notice, all these three things are very deep union with very high levels. Shvua is, like it says, as I swore to your forefathers, Mimei Kedem, from the beginning of time, the early days, the earliest, the primordial days. So he says that's Mebchinas Kadmenu Shalela. What's Mimei Kedem? So literally it means I swore to your forefathers in the early part of history, in the beginning of time, in the beginning of history. So it says Mebchinas Kadmenu Shalela. It comes from the level of Kadmenu Shalela, which is the way God is Kadman, before all Kadmenu, the thing that precedes existence. And that's also a union. So what's the point of all this? So through Teira, Bris, and Chesed, and Shvuah becomes the union of the souls in Atzmus Ein Sof. Not just in the reflection. Remember, because we said down below, that's what happens down below. And this is also the meaning God will preserve for you. What does this God will preserve? Because it's al derech we say in the morning, when we say neshama shenasata b'tahirihi, and even as the soul comes below, right, He will protect it and preserve it within you. After we say, what do we say? So you think three levels, right? Tahira barasa nafakta. I'm sorry, no, 1 second. 4 levels. Tahira barasa yatzarta nafakta. So you have Bri, Yitzira, and Asiya. After he counts the 4 levels, Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, and Asiya, Tahira, which we said earlier, remember, Tahira is the souls as they are in Atzilus. Malchus of Atzilus, B'nai Yerushalayim. And afterwards he concludes, and you protected within me. And so this is going at Etzem Neshama, that as the soul descends below, God Himself, Ata, protects it in there, because down below you need the most protection. Same thing, V'shamar L'cha, when he says He will preserve it for you, refers to Ata Meshamar B'kirbi. He's not spelling it out, but essentially it's the same idea. Shcheira and Ivanov, as the soul comes down below, it gets dark. But that's where it has the connection to the Atmos. But he's speaking here that He's protecting it. God protects the soul down below. That comes from Atmos. Okay.
So It's like the Keli is a higher connection with Atmos in a sense than Or.
What?
Keli is more like Atmos than Or.
Because why the Ekev Tishmon and little.
Ekev Tishmon, we define the beginning of this paragraph, that's the lower level of the neshama.
Correct.
And here we're taking the neshama, the kirbi, is also the highest level.
No, that down below, that's where God protects it, the kirbi.
That's the highest level of neshama.
Correct. That's a neshama is most connected to the soul as it's in the lowest levels. That's really what it means. He doesn't spell that out, but that's what the pashtus means.
I wonder if they'd ever would sit here and say, "Wow, I envy these ignorant people sitting there at the Farbrengen that they can achieve these things, and I'm such a high neshama that I can't because they're stronger and I'm not."
I don't think it's seen like that. It's not a contest. We're all part of one big picture. And we all support each other. We all help each other. We need each other. Because the Ekev Tishmon, and all this is through Ekev Tishmon. Here he goes, he explains it. And all this is through Ekev Tishmon, that the Ekev, that through the Ekev Shema, the lowest level of the soul, like the seal, the heel of the soul, not the soul of the soul, the heel of the soul. V'chein ben neshama is the beginning of Mashiach, and the same with this, and also with the souls in the level of Ikvus Mashiach, which is the end of time. The heel of Mashiach, when through Aveda, through work, you reach a state of Kala, of Kiloyan, of yearning, pining, Kiloyan, state of Kala, of reaching, inspiration. This all comes through the through the Aveda. You come through, because through this Aveda you come to Kala, and through this study of Torah you draw down a new energy. It's very clear that there's the two dimensions, Rotze and Shuv, Kala, Tefillah, and Torah. It's very clear that he keeps on focusing on those two things. Mm-hmm. And this is the meaning of these rules, these laws, that the soul in a state of Ekev, in its lowest state, binds itself to godliness in a state of Kiloyan, in a state of expiration, state of Kiloyan, being dissolved into. And again it says and it binds itself to Teira, that's Mishpatim, the rules, the laws. And the three things, Tishmon, Mishmatim, Masisim, are the three levels of thought, speech, and action. Through this, God will preserve the covenant. Now he's answering that question. This is not on a condition. He has before these three things are not conditioned, so why Ekev? It's not on condition. Kim Shekenu Eifnam Shachar the Kasher Ekev Tishmon. You're not saying Ekev when you will this. This is the way it transmitted Kasher when the Ekev, then the work is done from the level of Ekev. In other words, it's not a condition that if you do it, then you'll have these three things. It's more a statement of fact that when you do it. That when the soul, as it descends below in a state of Ekev, in a heel, in its lowest level, in its dark level, reaches up, yearns, and connects itself to Torah, which is the two sides. One is yearning up, and one is bringing it down. That draws down the three things that God will show. He will protect and preserve it. All the three things that he said, all this union that happens through the covenant, through the chesed, the kindness, and the oath we make Adam.
But it's still an if you do it,
He says no.
It's like Derek Manela, it's automatic. We'll do it and then we'll come. That's like,
It's a statement that this is how it happens. This is how it happens. Then God will preserve it for you. There'll be a revelation of the divine infinite light down below, because the three things, because Bris, Chesed, and Shavua all are Gilui of Atzmus Ein Sof below. A real condition, you can say, you do this, I'll do that.
Right.
The question he asked was, you can't say that on bris and on chesed and on shavua, because those three things were already established. That's what he said in the beginning of. That's what he asked. He said, you can't say it's a Tanai. What was the question? The whole point of a covenant, once it was made, was that even if there's something that separates, it will not weaken the love. That's what he said. So even when the generation is not worthy, there can't be a change. That's the whole point of the covenant. We made a covenant that no matter what happens, we stand together. That's the point. So how are you saying condition? That's what he's asked. That's what he asked. Same question he said about chesed. Chesed is you give chesed love to everybody. It's unconditional. And finally, shvuah, the same thing. Shvuah means I bond myself. I made an oath. You can't just suddenly say, you know what, if you didn't behave right, I changed my oath. So therefore, a condition would be where there isn't any of these intrinsic connections. So then I say to you, let's take a business contract. You follow the guidelines that we agreed upon, and I'll pay you. You don't follow, I don't pay you. That's it. That's a real condition. Here he's pointing out the shamas are connected to God, the etzem. That's the point. So he's talking about the process, how you reveal that. Obviously, it's a condition in the sense if you don't do it, you're not going to reveal it. But it's a different type of condition. It's not. There's no intrinsic bond.
He's doing his job no matter what, we still got to grab it.
Yeah, of course. That's the point. That's what he means to say. So the process is that the akev, when you come, you can come down and just remain dark and asleep.
Right. It's always
But yeah, that's the point exactly. So there's not, from God's point of view, He will not take it away from you if you do your effort. That's the key. In a contract, you don't. In a contract, I break the contract after 30 days. You don't fulfill it, you can't come back. It's over with. That's the key. Yeah. Okay. Does this help us? It helps a bit. I think the focus is very much, I see, on two things: on kala, keloyin, and drawing the rotze and the shuv. The davening is clearly kala. In other words, the yearning that we have when we're down below, the passion that he talked about, is clearly a davening passion. That's what davening is about. You're down below and you cry out, Shcheirani, I'm dark. Teira is not just reaching upward, Teira is bringing it back down into existence. But in Teira, there's the way you can quench the thirst, so it's for you, or you could be studying Teira to bring down Ir Chodosh. So that's really what it comes down to. As I said, I'll sum it up. As I go back, okay, let's do the summary. Kitzur. And this is, remember, after the previous chapter, we spoke at length why it's difficult for a soul below, as it cries out to the soul above, to achieve Yerushalayim. For the two reasons, because you have to have some recognition and familiarity with the divine, and that's very difficult to achieve down below, and we have to deal with the crassness. Zichur Chachemer. So that after that chapter, they said, V'zeu, and that's the meaning. Hagam d'shcheran, even though I am dark, meaning as I descend below, I have darkness. I'm shrouded in darkness. Mekol mokim v'naiva. Nevertheless, I am beautiful. But take of hatzemoyin with the intensity of my thirst. It's a beautiful line. V'hubchin is kala. That's the level of kala. Achesi avat midis bekrirus. The level of achesi kachesi, sister, sibling, that's a love that is constant and cool. We said it was really stable. What was the word I used before? Like calm. A calm. It doesn't mean krirus here in the klippa type of krirus like coldness and detachment. It means krirus. There's no passion involved. It's not fiery. It's like water. Yes, like calm waters. Kala hi avet pnimis. Kala is a deeper, intimate love. Ubiyira habitl danochas atzmusei hulamata dafka. And also in Yira, remember he said Yira too, Yira, the bitl of putting yourself completely aside, completely nullified, completely set yourself aside is dafka below. Al derech da bitl de eneid hu dafka b'hayesh. Like the bitl of eneid, that there's nothing else, is specifically in the yesh. Eir is the bitl kula kamek lochashiv, that it's completely nullified. Yesh, that really senses, because it's interesting irony, paradox. The yesh, which is so much absorbed with itself, when it recognizes, it really recognizes that nothing else. You know, it's almost the material world is the only one that can really appreciate valuelessness. Because matter has no value. Eir has value. Eir is alakus, it's gili. Yeah, only this world really can appreciate complete valuelessness. Yeah. Because physicality has no substance. Eir, Ruchnis can say, I have substance, I'm divine, I reflect God. It's only a world that is completely absorbed with itself that can dictate and say, this is baloney, this whole thing is BS. And Eir can't say that. Eir can say, I'm completely nullified. I can't say it's all BS, because on the contrary, it's only Kedusha there.
That's why Kaylee can identify with the Asmos.
Yeah. It's a Meridika concept. Yeah. Because this world really has no substance. When you think about it, what this table has to exist, has no real value. Atzilus, you could say God chose God, it's a reflection of godliness. We also know it doesn't have to exist, but this world is that teaches Einei that Atzilus also has no value. But Atzilus on its own doesn't know that. The same thing, Neshama is compared to Teira above. Above, they're rooted in the letters of Teira. And below, the soul gets bound to the Eir of Teira, not just the Asis, not the Kalim of Teira, in other words, not the containers, but the Eir of Teira. And now he adds, not just Eir Teira, but also Eir Chodesh. Someone asked me if it meant Er Chayzer. Here you could interpret, because Ratzah usually is Er Chayzer, but it doesn't mean Er Chayzer, because he doesn't use that word. So the new energy that's drawn down through the thirst, through the Ratzah, through the yearning, instead of Kala. The Kala is a Kaloyan. She's yearning. Yeah, souls don't yearn above, because there's nothing to yearn, because they're already there. I remember once an ad for a motorcycle. Transportation for those who are already there. I told Rabbi Kastel to use it for a Begisha. Transportation for those who are already there. He didn't get it. He says, if they're there, why would they need transportation? I told him, that's the Chiddush. The same thing now, the connection between Teira and Kutch B'richu. In Atzilus Teira is letters. Ulamata, and we learned in the Kesed, it's engraved letters. In Atzilus, it's written letters. Ulamata, and below Aydei Neshama, should be a comma like afterwards. And same thing, Araisa connecting Teira into Kutch B'richu. Because Lamayla Batsilis, it's written letters. And Lamata, below, through Neshamas Yisrael, through the souls of Israel, Miskasher is Batsis Ein Sof. Teira gets bond with Atzmas, with the core Ein Sof. V'zeh v'yekov Tishmon, and this is the meaning of v'yekov Tishmon, Ekev HaNeshama Lamata. Ekev Neshama, the seal of the soul, below. V'hayidei HaRotzeh, b'chinas Kala, and through the yearning of the state of Kala, of Tishmon as Teisvus Er B'Teira. You hear, you recognize, you appreciate, you draw down the additional abundant energy in Teira. That's Ekev Tishmon. Beautiful. My friends. I will say the following. I mean, some specific levels, I'm not clear all the details because it's very brief and he hasn't fully explained it. Just looking at the next chapter, the next mimer, the levels of discussion. Okay, we'll learn this later. Fine. Let me just say a few things, and I think we'll just sum it up here. The context of Ayin Beis, it works very well. Because as I've said a number of times, the difference between Samach Vav and Ayin Beis, Samach Vav is the first big hemshech of the Rebbe Rashab. I once heard the Rebbe said, Samach Vav is the deepest, is the most fundamental hemshech, and Ayin Beis is the deepest hemshech of Chassidus. Samach Vav, which was delivered over a period of 3-4 years, starting Rosh Hashanah 1905. There the focus is, as I mentioned, is Ben Shanasa Eved. That even though Neshama is a Ben, which means like a child, like here, like we learn like a daughter, like in that sense, and there's a certain connection, a natural connection, because a Ben, as he explains there from Zohar, has access all the way in the king's palace, can just hang around in the king's inner sanctum. The goal is Shanasa Eved, the Ben should come down below and serve not like a Ben that has its Giluyim, but to reach Etzem, to Raved it through the hard work of struggling like a servant, a son that becomes a servant. That's like the big theme of Ayin Beis, of Samach Vav. And the servant is the one that reaches through struggle, Aved b'koyach atzmei, self-initiative, exertion, Yegiya b'teira, as he explains there. So really, the big focus in Ayin Beis, even though he speaks obviously all levels, is much more tefillah than Torah. Because Torah is ben. Torah is you're comfortable. You're learning about God. Tefillah is going out of yourself. And Torah itself, tefillah shebat Torah, is Yegiya b'teira. Now you're not just learning it, but you're struggling, overcoming obstacles. It's the big theme in Ayin Beis. In Samach Vav. I've always thought that Ayin Beis came after Samach Vav. So Rebbe Rashab was now giving us the full picture. After Samach Vav teaches us the power of a Ben Shanasa Eved, the power of Eved Pashut, as he elaborates there at length, how you go out of yourself and you reach Mamata Lamaila. From below up, you reach the deepest places. That Ayin Beis, again, has overlap, but its main focus is Torah. That's why in Samach Vav he leans more toward the opinion that the Eiris have no particles. Pshutim. Because the point there is to get out of shape and form, to reach that place. A son has a shape and form, an Eved has no shape and form. And Ayin Beis, the focus is the second opinion, the opinion that it's Eiris Mitsuyarim, as he says many times, that the energy has particles, because the focus here is Yichud. I would say like Ayin Beis, Samach Vav Bittel, Ayin Beis is Yichud, unity. Tefillah is much more Bittel, Torah is much more Yichud. Again, they have overlap. That make it very clear. Everything has everything. But we're talking about primarily. So, if Samach Vav is Ben Shanasa Eved, Ayin Beis is Eved Shanasa Ben. Now that you've become an Eved, and you've learned to reach through Kabbalah Sale, in Torah, through Yegiya and Bittel, as he discusses at length in Samach Vav, now the goal is to come bring it back down into our existence and to internalize it and make a Yichud. God wants you to be a partner with you. And that's where you see in Ayin Beis much more focus on interface. The interface, how does it get connected? In Samach Vav he mentions it, and it's important. But there, ultimately, it's really the reaching out. It's almost the yearning, the going out of. It's all this comes to mind when we're learning now about Torah and Tefillah. We learn the two different ways. So Torah, well, before Torah and Tefillah, we have a Veda that connects, like by David HaMelech Torah, that relates to us. Then there's the reason to reach the Torah that's beyond us, Shashrim Lefanov. But that too needs to be integrated. So it sounds to me very much like that Tefillah keeps reminding us it's not about you. But Ayin Bey's focus is that he wants it about you, but not on your terms. Like we spoke Gvul of the world, we want a Gvul, but Gvul how God sees Gvul. See, in Asamach Vav, the focus would be how Gvul should recognize Bli Gvul. And it reaches upward and outward, and outside of itself. Ayin Beis wants to come back to Gvul, but not Gvul on our terms. He's not going lower. Now that you've seen how Atzmus sees things, now let's bring it back and internalize that you should see it the way God Atzmus sees it. That's Yichud. But you can't come to that without first Bittul. Because if you look at your terms, we have a very myopic perspective. We see things in a certain level. So first you have to get out of your ben, your tzir, your shape and form, to get something beyond. Then the beyond comes back into you, because now it's shir atzmi b'keich, how God envisions existence. And that's medida atzmis of Torah. It's not a gvul as we understand. It's gvul because God wants gvul. The artist who has infinite possibilities wants one particular shape and form. So it seems to me, and then reading these chapters, Tefillah reminds us. Well, let's start with Torah in the morning. When you start learning Torah in the morning, the first thing is you got to get awake. Okay, so that's clearly about you. You got to get yourself into gear. You can't jump into the divine if you're not aware. So the neshama is concealed in this dark place. That's Torah Mikada Adaita Denafsh. Okay. Then comes davening, and davening starts talking about God. It's not about you. You start yearning. There's a deep hunger. The ava, the contemplation that brings you to high levels. The very deepest kashas. You're now connecting. But he asked the question, so then what does Torah do afterwards? Because it's out of you, it's not integrated. So you've gone out, it's like Samach Vav, but we want Ayin Beis, we want the Yichud, we want Torah. That's what Torah does. A second explanation is that Tefillah is connected ultimately, as much as you climb up, it's still going to be on your terms. Because it's you're relating to it. Torah brings you a message from another place. Torah is Atzmus, speaking to us. Matan Torah, Vayered Hashem, God comes down. Before Matan Torah, everyone could daven, but they couldn't have Torah. I mean, they had Torah as we spoke, Torah the way it was given, Torah Chachma, maybe the Asius, as Torah relates to existence. But by Matan Torah you have a gift. This gift can only come from above. This gift allows us to see the divine from the divine perspective. So that's like the second interpretation. So Tefillah is connected to existence ultimately. Even though it's also you going out of yourself, but it still relates. Torah, number one, quenches that thirst and draws it down into you. But then, more importantly, even deeper, Torah brings you a message from another place. How Atzmus sees things. So it's no longer learning Torah to quench your thirst. It's no longer learning Torah to get your soul going and connecting to God. It's getting God's connection. The new energy entering into Torah, and through that into us. That's the gist of the Hemshech here and the whole context of interface. What still bothers me is obviously this parentheses. Because even with what I just said now, what's Ifna Beis? We'll study it some more and we'll figure it out. Maybe the Rebbe Rashab will leave us more hints as we go along. I just wanted to add this into the context. I hope this was helpful. And this comes down to David's Mirasei Lichukecha. So David was punished because he was focusing on the Torah as it relates. And you need the Torah Shashim Lefanov, and that too has to be brought down. But it's God's delights, not ours. Okay. We concluded discourse number 44. The end of chapter 178. We went through, and they summed up page 363, and then learned 364 through 365.